Thank you for this introduction, and I'm so excited to be here. So I want to talk about the impacts that COVID had on food safety and also on our perceptions of food safety. And certainly the last 6, 7 months were a stress test on our industry, on our society, and on the Western civilization as a whole. We all had a front row seat to the stress test. Nevertheless, I do feel that it is informative to look back. And please join me on this quick walk down the memory lane. As the cities were shuttering, food industry workers, grocery store clerks, truck drivers, essential workers all showed up every day to harvest crops, process them, pack them, distribute them, and bring them to the consumers. Recall that during the early days of the pandemic, before CDC was certain of the value of face masks, essential workers in our industry showed up to feed the nation with little personal protection. Remember when the existing supply and distribution chains collapsed, seemingly overnight, members of our industry stepped up and did everything they could to make sure that food banks were fully stocked and the needy citizens had access to the food and nutrition that they need. The industry, together with the organizations that represent industry's interests, worked with USDA to institutionalize Farmers to Families food box program, which distributed over 100 million food boxes to the consumers. During this 9 months, every American learned that food industry workers are essential workers. Food industry workers are the unsung heroes of the pandemic. Let this be one of the stories that we remember after the pandemic is over. In the early days of the pandemic, all of us had to become experts in public communications and public health. All of us had to work to counter false narratives. We all learned an important skill on how to extract meaningful information when there were very few data points. Remember that during early days of the pandemic, powerful voices in the social media and even CNN's chief medical correspondent propagated hysterical theories on how to wash fruits and vegetables in homemade chlorine concoctions and how to wipe groceries with Lysol wipes. Remember the publication of the results of a study of coronavirus persistence on cruise ships? Taken out of context, it created quite a sensation. The study, however, was sensational because many public health experts never learned about transfer coefficient, something that we learned during the sophomore food safety course. We all learned a lesson here. We need to communicate better. We need to tell the story of food better. We can't rely on TV or social media personalities to tell the story of food. I know it can be intimidating to speak up, to go against the loud voices in the media, but it is imperative that we tell the story of food. I'm proud to say that we at PMA collaborate with a dozen or so scientists to bring this information directly to the consumers from the very beginning of the pandemic. We started a series of interviews with experts, which are still available on our website, and virtual town halls to directly communicate to the consumers, to our members in the industry, and to our friends in the media. Together with academic experts, just like you, we were able to counter reckless narratives of washing produce in chlorine or wiping groceries and takeout containers with Lysol. We stopped the very harmful idea of making workers spend time in ozone gas chambers to somehow sterilize them. And today I ask you to be vigilant. There are so many scientific and science-adjacent narratives that have already been litigated in the court of public opinion. Climate change, evolution, vaccines, just name a few. Don't get trapped in circular arguments. Instead, invest your energy and your knowledge wisely. We have a unique opportunity to tell the story of food. So make it your mission to invest your knowledge into telling the story of food. One of the stories of the pandemic, for example, is that after rushing to buy boxed mac and cheese, consumers turned to fruits and vegetables. Sales of citrus and citrus juices have been declining over the last few years. However, during the pandemic, consumers rediscovered the importance of fresh fruits and vegetables in their diets. Let this be one of the stories of food that we tell. As I was getting ready for this presentation, I realized that the last time we came together in the industry in person was over a year ago. And it's easy to miss the big dinners, the big laughs, and big bear hugs. But I hope that we don't seduce ourselves into thinking that our society's realities, our industry's realities, 9 months ago were free of challenges. It's been an election year, and we all have heard, not only once and probably not even twice, arguments about where we have been and where we are and where we could be as a society. And I'm not going to reiterate these arguments, but I want to leave you with these 5 numbers that I want you to remember: 70, 37, 6, 1/3, and 23.8. The first of these numbers is 70. 70% of the Americans who are overweight or obese. The high rates of overweight and obesity are an important public health problem in and of themselves, and they are a driver for prevalent diet-related chronic diseases, such as cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, and some types of cancer. At present, 6 in 10 Americans have a chronic condition, and 4 in 10 Americans have 2 or more chronic conditions. The Friedman School of Nutrition Science and Policy at Tufts University estimates that each year in the US, the health costs of cardiovascular disease are around $316 billion. Each year cost of diabetes to the US is $327 billion. Various factors contribute to the prevalence of chronic diseases, and prominent among these are unhealthy dietary patterns and a lack of physical activity. Public health consequences and the cost to the healthcare system of the obesity epidemic are truly staggering. Yet there isn't a single person in this room who doesn't know that the solutions are physical activity and a diet rich in fresh fruits and vegetables. We all know that the consumption of fresh fruits and vegetables on at least half a plate at each meal will have the most consequential impact on driving down the obesity epidemic. We know exactly what an ounce of prevention looks like. Well, in this case, it's not an ounce, it's more like at least 5 servings a day. In 2020, research at the Friedman School of Nutrition Science and Policy at Tufts estimated that over 105,000 Americans die each year specifically from not eating enough fresh fruits and vegetables. In 2020, NIH invested $3 billion in research on cardiovascular disease, diabetes, and obesity. This is the entire budget for all of USDA research, education, and economic activities, including salaries, capital expenditures, and actual investments by USDA ARS, USDA ERS, and USDA NIFA. It is time that the academic community join forces with the industry and trade associations to demand equitable federal investment in food science research. The healthcare and pharmaceutical companies benefit annually from tens of billions of federal funds directed toward biomedical research. Deans of ag schools, directors of ag experiment stations should not equivocate when they demand fair share of federal support for investment in food science and food safety research. I promise you, the industry and the industry trade associations will stand with you and support these efforts. Research and development should not be the burden for the industry to carry on its own. We'll look to partner and work together, but the federal investment in food science needs to be equitable. 37 is my next number. 37 is for 37 million Americans who live in households that were uncertain of having or unable to acquire enough food to meet their needs. In fact, my first two numbers, 70% of Americans who are obese or overweight, and 37 million of us who live in food insecure households, are in fact significantly overlapping numbers. Food insecurity and obesity are the two sides of the same coin. The question of whether food insecurity causes obesity was first published in 1995. Since then, the body of evidence exploring this relationship has grown substantially. Despite several hypotheses that have been proposed to explain the link between food insecurity and body weight, we're still trying to understand how food insecurity and obesity are related, and if there is a causative link, what mechanisms are involved. Clearly, widespread availability of high-calorie, low-cost foods consumed by those experiencing food insecurity is one of the problems. Theoretical models have proposed a mechanistic explanation drawing on findings from the intersection of evolutionary biology, ecology, and obesity research. The great availability of low-cost, energy-dense foods in neighborhoods where food insecurity is high is thought to play a key role in the association between food insecurity and BMI. Study after study linked food insecurity with anxiety and depression and an unhealthy relationship with food through maladaptive coping. Individuals seek to alleviate distress through eating energy-dense, palatable foods. These unhealthy, energy-dense foods are abundant in low-income communities. Corner stores are not incentivized to carry perishable foods. SNAP benefits, which used to be known as food stamps, can be used for an array of unhealthy food options. These two factors feed into each other, creating a vicious loop of excluding fresh fruits and vegetables from vulnerable communities. When you talk to decision makers, it is critical that we continue to point out that programs that aim to solve food insecurity cannot do that at the expense of public health. Cheap calories in energy-rich foods, is the fastest solution to food insecurity, they're also the wrong solution. We can't band-aid food insecurity by laying the foundation for an explosion in obesity, cardiovascular disease, and diabetes 5-10 years from now. I want to draw your attention to the efforts of the Center of Health, Law, and Policy Innovation at Harvard Law School to mainstream produce prescription programs. It is a new initiative to create access to nutritious foods and improve health outcomes for people with diet-related diseases. Produce prescription programs, or Produce RX as they're known, they enable healthcare providers to distribute vouchers for free or discounted produce to patients living with or at high risk of diet-related health conditions, such as diabetes or hypertension. Mounting evidence indicates that Produce RX programs can improve health outcomes for individuals who are lower income and or living with diet-related disease by promoting access to healthy foods and reducing the financial burden to maintain a healthy diet. The COVID-19 pandemic starkly demonstrates the importance of nutritious diets. It is estimated that 76% of deaths from COVID-19 are among individuals with an underlying condition, many of which are diet-related. Despite growing evidence for the effectiveness of Produce RX, access to these programs remains limited. The COVID-19 pandemic has reaffirmed the need for flexibilities in our healthcare system, food, and public access to health. And with mainstreaming Produce RX programs initiative, we have an opportunity to build innovative policies that better connect these systems, making them stronger and more resilient now and long after the pandemic is over. This third number is 6. 6 million children in food insecure households. At least once a week, 6 million of American children go to bed hungry. Imagine populations of Kansas and Nebraska and also 2 other small states, Vermont and South Dakota, entirely populated by children. And that's how many American children go to bed hungry every night. Given the critical role nutrition plays in fetal and childhood development, we must be clear-eyed about the long-term impacts of food insecurity on pregnant and lactating women and during infancy, toddlerhood, and adolescence. Existing studies show that food insecurity in pregnancy and postpartum to be associated with disordered eating, variations in gestational weight gain, depending on pre-pregnancy weight, and decreased duration of breastfeeding. One study found that infants and toddlers from low-income households that had food insecurity were at significantly greater developmental risk in areas such as language, motor, and social economic development than those from low-income households but without food insecurity. Another study showed that in a large sample of US adolescents, food insecurity was associated with a greater risk of mental disorders after controlling for other social economic related variables, such as extreme poverty. Understanding how food insecurity affects development across the lifespan is key to informing both interventions and policy approaches for particular segments of the population. My next number is 1/3. USDA estimates that 1/3 of all food produced in the United States is lost or wasted. Food is wasted or lost along the entire food production continuum, and we must figure out how to fight food loss and food waste. There are at least 150 billion pounds of food that are wasted in the US each year. Cross-check this number, 150 billion, against 37 million of Americans who are in food insecure households. We need smart solutions to on-farm storage and processing, or developing value-added products, or exploring secondary markets, or figure out how to turn excess food into donations or process them into animal feed. It is important that we don't equate combating food loss and food waste with dumpster diving. Don't think of it as low-quality refuse. That's the wrong mindset if you want to find durable solutions for figuring out markets for the 150 billion pound of lost or wasted food, which is roughly 1/3 of the food that we produce. Food is lost or wasted along the entire farm-to-fork continuum. Food is lost in a field to pests and diseases. Sometimes fruits and vegetables are not harvested at all. When there is no demand for a product, the cost of labor to harvest a commodity can be so high as it is so prohibitive for a farmer to incur losses twice, during planting and then at harvest. Food loss can occur before it gets to the store, when the cold chain is interrupted, and when it gets to the store and the quality begins to decline if the product is not sold on time. A significant waste also occurs when the food is prepared and consumed. We rarely finish everything on a plate, and leftovers often linger in the fridge before they get pitched. All of it is familiar to you. Not familiar to you are two women, Srila Sharma, a professor at University of Texas School of Public Health, and Lisa Helfman. For several years, Lisa Helfman and her family took part in a weekly fruit and vegetable co-op, and she watched her children's eating habits dramatically transform. So much that her little boy turned down a piece of cake at a birthday party, craving instead the blueberries he'd grown fond of eating at home. Like most moms, Lisa realized this was a fairly significant decision for a 6-year-old. She wondered what kind of influence regular access to fresh produce might have on children, especially if it were free to families. She was inspired to replicate this type of positive change in underserved communities identified as food deserts, or areas where access to grocery stores stocked with fresh fruits and vegetables is sorely limited. Because nutrition education in these communities is often equally lacking, Lisa's vision was to bring produce co-op to schools in the neighborhood that included an educational component. To start, she created a collaborative partnership with Dr. Srila Sharma, an expert in nutrition and professor of epidemiology at UT Health School of Public Health, and they launched a program now known as Brighter Bites. They started a program in Houston where they aggregated and distributed produce donated by farmers and also retailers, boxed it and distributed it to school children, along with tasty, healthy recipes, along with nutrition education to minimize food waste at home. They distributed produce, about 50, 60 servings per family per week for 16 weeks during the school year and 8 weeks during the summer. Eligibility for Brighter Bites is based on site-level economic status. 75% of children on free or reduced price lunch programs in schools, for example, or a Head Start program. And when parents pick up their children from school, each family receives 2 bags of produce per week. Family members taste a recipe made by Brighter Bites staff using a produce item in the bag. And families also receive the recipes and tips on how to prepare it at home. Brighter Bites is implemented at no cost to the site or the families. The commitment is for the parents of family members to engage in a weekly co-op to assist with bagging and distributing the produce. At the start of the school year or in summer, families from participating sites opt into the program, and families from participating sites may re-enroll into the program each school year. Brighter Bites started organically in 2012 with 150 families in a single school, and the program since then has distributed over 40 million pounds of fresh produce and millions of nutrition education materials to more than 475,000 individuals, including teachers, in multiple cities across the country. But they don't just track pounds distributed to the families, they track health outcomes. Results of their work shows that even 2 years post-intervention, as compared to the baseline, there was a significant increase in child intake of fruit, vegetable, and fiber, and significant decrease in total fat intake and percent daily calories from sugary beverages. Parent dietary data showed significant increases in fruit and vegetable intake. Changes in the home nutrition environment included increased frequency of cooking behaviors, increased usage of nutrition, fact labels in making grocery purchasing decisions, and increased availability of fruits and vegetables. This is how you design a program that fights hunger, obesity, and food waste. I also invite you to learn the story of Christine Mosley, a founder of a company called Full Harvest. One day, Christine saw how romaine lettuce has been harvested, and she saw that almost half of the lettuce plant, delicious, nutritious greens, are left in a field. She saw an opportunity. Christine built a company which Forbes magazine called one of the most innovative ag tech startups of 2017. And EggFunder, a prominent venture capitalist investment platform, recognized Christine's company with the 2019 EggFunder Tech Innovation Award. Full Harvest, Christine's company, rescues ugly and unwanted produce, paying a fair price to the farmers who grow fruits and vegetables. 2 years ago, when I managed a USDA NIFA Small Business Research Innovation Program, we made a small investment into a company called Regrained, which thought of a way to convert spent burr grains into snacks. 2 weeks ago, when the Whole Foods Market announced their 2021 hot trends, regrain bars were front and center, sharing the spotlight with the other hot upcycled foods, chips and jerky made from fruit and vegetable pulp, and baking flour made with soybean pulp. Also in 2018, NIFA SBIR grant supported a Penn State professor, Gregory Ziegler, who discovered a water-soluble orange pigment stable at pH range from 2 to 12. He discovered it while helping his son with a science fair project. They extracted this pigment from avocado pits. This food-grade orange dye with unique biochemical properties is now the hottest dye in the market. Even though Christine's company Full Harvest, Regrained, and Professor Ziegler's Persea are successful pioneers in this space, there are still billions and billions of pounds of perfectly good food, and not just fruits and vegetables, that are never seen by the consumers. I urge you to think of creative ways to put this food on the tables for the consumers. What creativity and innovation will you bring to the market to unlock the potential of 1/3 of our food that is lost or wasted? The last number that I want to leave you with is 26.8. That's 26.8 million pounds of plastic waste that end up in a landfill each year in the United States. In my opinion, hydrocarbon-based polymers are probably the most fascinating chemistry that changed every aspect of life in the modern world. Waste from single-use plastics is also suffocating our planet. 70, 37, 6, 1/3, and 23.8. These are the 5 numbers that I hope that you remember after today. You should also ask me, but how do these 5 numbers, 70, 36, 6, 1/3, and 23.8, relate to the theme of this event, which is food safety? And most directly is my answer. But first, please allow me to digress for a minute. In January, at our board meeting, we had a strategic planning exercise when we invited a moderator from a company called Singularity University to help us game out how various disruptive technologies will impact the food industries. Really quickly, I will share with you only one example, a self-driving car. What industries will it disrupt, and how will it impact food industries? And the intuitive answer is that others in transportation, trains, taxis, mass transit, will be the most disrupted. But that's an example of very superficial thinking. We dug deeper, and clearly self-driving cars will disrupt the insurance business with robots and algorithms involved in decision-making. There'll be fewer accidents, and the insurance industry, entire risk model scenario used today will be obsolete. With fewer accidents, there will be, luckily, fewer fatalities, but fewer fatalities also means that there will be fewer organs available for transplantations. Medical services will be impacted. But did you also know that 60% of all caffeinated beverages are sold along the freeways, so the drivers don't fall asleep behind the wheel? With nobody needing to stay awake, beverage industry will look very different. If not caffeine-containing drinks, what will passengers choose to consume in their self-driving cars? What will they do with their time in a self-driving car? Let's get back to our 5 numbers and apply the same strategic planning framework for thinking about them to understand how they connect to food safety. Single-use plastics right now is our best bet in ensuring safety of most foods on the supermarket shelves. We will not figure out plastic waste until there is another solution for ensuring food safety. What will be the food safety disruption that will make single-use plastics obsolete? There is no conversation about reducing food loss and food waste without figuring out how to do it safely. What is that food safety solution that will bring 150 billions of pounds of lost or wasted food back to your and my table? We will also not be able to bring nutritious, fresh fruits and vegetables to the communities that so desperately need them until we figure out how to do it safely. In the city where I live, Washington, D.C., for many communities, the only source of groceries are corner stores. Many of these corner stores carry more varieties of cigarettes than they have of fresh fruits and vegetables. There are very few foods in the world that per dollar, per pound, pack the nutritional benefits of most fresh fruits and vegetables. To figure out how to get them to every food desert, urban or rural, we have to sort out shelf life, quality, and safety issues. Delivery services for groceries is one of the most promising technologies for getting fresh fruits and vegetables to urban and rural food deserts. We see companies that use drone technologies as self-driving robots to distribute food. However, neither the economics of this last mile nor the food safety kinks have been worked out. And the biggest unlock that will change the public health trajectory and the cost of healthcare is figuring out how to get consumers to eat at least the amount of fruits and vegetables that the USDA My Plate recommends. When we do consumer focus groups, food safety considerations are often among the top 10 concerns of consumers who do not eat enough fresh produce. These were only highlighted during the pandemic. A survey of over 2,000 consumers by Deloitte revealed that more than half of the consumers feel stressed when shopping in stores, resulting in less frequent visits. Other key findings of the study include the emergence of safety as a prominent factor when shopping in a store. Nearly 90% of survey responders said both safety and price were purchase drivers. And while a majority of consumers, 70%, still value drivers such as sustainability and locally sourced foods, they are now less urgent than they were last year, says Deloitte. As much as consumers are concerned about food safety, PMA's own research indicates that healthy is a negative driver of food purchases. We crave comfort foods when we're anxious. We want rich and bold flavors to get to a happy state. When we want to be seen as cool or in the know, we casually bring a cup of an expensive coffee to share, or share a seaweed chip snack with an office mate. We associate savory with protein rich and seek to consume something that is revitalizing when we're not caught up on the 8 hours of sleep. We look for dependable, consistent, and convenient when we seek to be calm. It turns out that we never look for healthy food. In our research, healthy was the only negative driver. It was the least desirable kind of food. How is that for a conundrum, which in reality is obvious news? Food safety scientists, practitioners, we continue to learn every day. And the most important lesson that I hope we learned is that solutions to the problems exemplified by my 5 numbers will require systems thinking. You've heard this statement thousands of times, system solutions. And yes, systems approach is hard. It requires collaborations. It requires collaborations and negotiations with disciplines and people who are different, difficult, always uncomfortable, and sometimes egotistical. It requires sharing of ideas and yes, sharing budgets. If you just let me be and let me do my little thing, I've heard that so many times when I was a researcher myself and when I managed the research investment portfolio at NIFA. I promise you, one more survey, a dozen more diet curves, 100 more biofilm dispersion studies, and other thousands of whole genome sequences will not bring us any closer to changing these 5 numbers: 70, 37, 6, 1/3, and 23.8. We all came out of the reductionist tradition, and it will continue to be a very difficult habit to unlearn. But the resources that we have today at our fingertips were unimaginable even a decade ago. These are the resources that will enable collaboration and systems-level problem solving. Did you know that the guidance computer from the Apollo 11 mission that safely landed man on the moon had 4 kilobytes of RAM and 32 kilobytes hard disk? It ran at 43,000 kilohertz. iPhone 12 has memory of 4 gigabytes, between 64 and 256 gigabytes of storage. Depending on the metric you choose, the device many of you have in your pocket is 100,000 or even million times more powerful than the Apollo 11 guidance computer. In addition to the staggering advances in computational power, its cost and the cost of data storage are minuscule. It is estimated that the Apollo 11 guidance computer cost approximately $150,000 in the 1970 dollars. Compare that with the cost of your iPhone. And we can use similar examples to compare the cost of genome sequencing and annotation, automation of cloning, robotics for cell and culture propagation, automated mutagenesis and selection, etc. Are we fully capitalizing on these resources in our systems approach to food safety to make a dent in the 5 numbers: 70, 37, 6, 1/3, and 23.8? In the remaining time, please allow me to share some tools, technologies, and questions that I see coming to the market. These are ripe for collaboration with researchers who are serious about systems thinking and driving down these 5 numbers. Number one, shelf life extension. Fresh produce and a number of other perishable commodities have a very short shelf life, beyond which food quality and food safety issues begin to arise. Coming to the market are sequestration of ethylene, chemically or through breeding, edible and inedible peelable polymer coatings, microbiome manipulations, control of other storage solutions, grass chemistry, and cold plasma treated water from misters. Some of these are already found in commercial applications. And Oprah and Katy Perry, for example, backed the California company Appeal, which is working with edible coatings for high-value fruits. 2, robotics and labor challenges. Labor challenges are perennial in agriculture, and they impact and are themselves impacted by a myriad of social, political factors. Humans are also very efficient vectors of foodborne illness. I challenge you to think how robotization of harvesting and processing can resolve a food safety challenge. Look to great companies like Wish Farms for examples of how robots can be used to pick, for example, strawberries. 3, sensors. Unlike the medical field, where PCRs and culture-based detection still rule, for us, testing is mostly a statistical challenge. Don't waste time on designing a better set of PCR primers or optimizing medium composition. Partner with a good statistician to conceive a sensor that can make post-harvest testing meaningful, fast, and efficient. 4, digitization of food industry. And here, one word is visibility. Consumers already want to know everything about their food. Within 3 to 5 years, they will need to know everything about their food. Full supply chain visibility will minimize fraud, will ensure that adulterated products never reach a consumer's fridge or a table, and they will also be a great tool to increase business efficiency. What does a digital distributed food safety ledger look like? What information belongs there? 5, data analytics and precision ag. What data are missing that prevents us from figuring out why outbreaks linked to fresh produce occur with terrifyingly predictable seasonality? 6, intersection of biotech and food safety. One of the least celebrated advantages of BT corn is the fact that it is twice less likely to be contaminated with mycotoxins. This was not an intended goal, but it was a fortuitous outcome of insect pest control. Intact kernels are less susceptible to mycotoxin-producing fungi. Where else can we partner with plant geneticists and breeders to achieve better food safety outcomes? In January, at our strategic planning, we gamed out how a self-driving car will impact the industry. We did not consider an even more radical scenario. What if people don't drive at all? Stay in their homes for 7 months. How will that impact our industry? Even though yoga mats, microphones, and virtual reality goggles were among the first non-essential items that disappeared from brick and mortar and e-stores, most of us did not become yogis or podcasters, and we got so bored with VR. Turns out, the majority of us turned to reimagining our relationship with food, cooking, baking, brewing, fermenting. What will be the next nodes in this chain of events is we're about to find out. We can be either passive observers or active makers of this future. In the words of my boss, PMA CEO Kathy Burns, we can either settle for the new normal or we can forge the new extraordinary. I see that you have a packed program ahead of you today and tomorrow. As you look around and listen to other presentations, I challenge you to think about my 5 numbers: 70, 37, 6, 1/3, and 23.8. How can you make these numbers go down?